Welcome to From the Shed Ends, episode 146. It's a good job I remember what episode we're on. Episode 146. We are live, so if you're here, please make sure you subscribe, like the video. Theo, how you doing?
Good, yeah. I mean, I wasn't too good over the weekend after the performance and the result on Saturday. Just did a bit of sport on Sunday, played tennis with my dad, which helped me decompress. But yeah, I guess I'm looking forward to this week. I'm not sure if anyone's listening from London on today, but it's just such weird weather. It's like blue skies and sunshine for 5 minutes, then it's thunderstorms and rain the next 5 minutes. So it's just very bipolar weather. But yeah, looking forward to actually a break from football and no Chelsea until next Monday for once. I feel like it might do us a bit of good. But yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, just like you said, it's been a difficult. I think it's been a difficult week when you look back to the highs and lows. Obviously, the win against Wolves, and then you come to Man City and the way that we played, which you're going to talk about. But it's just, yeah, it's not been good. But the weather's good. The sun is shining. Busy weekend of just family stuff. So yeah, it's been a good weekend. But apart from that, Chelsea seem to piss on my parade still. Yeah, let's dive straight into it. Obviously, it was Man City 3, Chelsea 1. Really good start from us. Let's start with the lineup, which I don't think really threw up many surprises in terms of what we thought potentially would be our lineups. But and we started the game really well. But what was your thoughts? Obviously, you went to the game, you travelled up. What was your thoughts initially on the lineup and how we started in the game and leading up to that first goal?
I think no real surprises with the lineup. I'm pretty sure I kind of mentioned if Colwell was fit, then he should be starting along Chalobah. If not, then start Tosin. Colwell ended up starting with Chalobah, who again I thought Chalobah was fantastic on the day. Should have had an assist for Cole Palmer. Then I think the only change I would have made was maybe Neto for Madueke, but I know that Madueke got his goal, even though it was just a goal on the goal line against Wolves. That's probably what got him into the starting 11. Another goal on Saturday, albeit a tap in, but I still would have started Neto. I feel like Madueke is a very particular case, and I have a lot to say about him as a person, him as a player. Um, but yeah, no real surprise with the lineup, and I feel like we started off really well.
Yeah.
If you remember back to our recording on Friday, I mentioned that we need to kind of take the game to them, not be afraid to take kind of risks and just play our football, similarly to how Villa played against them at Villa Park and had a chance after like almost 30 seconds with a one-on-one against Ortega. That's pretty much what we did. I think within the first 5 minutes, we had about 2 or 3 shots on goal, and
Yeah.
we scored a goal through a mistake from the I think he's Kazakhstani or Uzbekistani, Kazakhstani centre back Kushanov, who looked very, very nervy for the first 45. So we capitalised on that. Jackson squared it across to Madueke, who just had to touch it in. And yeah, being at Etihad, I was in the upper section of the away stand and literally could almost touch the Man City fans. That's how close I was to them. So enjoyed celebrating that first goal, but all downhill after that. And then I pretty much regretted where I was sat.
Yeah, I bet.
Um, then that big chance afterwards, that's for me the huge tipping point of the game. Huge tipping point. Because we started off so well, and then within almost a minute or two after Madueke opens the score, I think it's Chalobah puts a through ball into Palmer. Palmer could have shot. I still back him to shoot, given his confidence and the type of player he is, but decides to square it to Jackson, who again should have just bloody shot with his left foot. Even if it means sliding across the grass and kind of stretching to put it in, do
Yeah.
that. But instead, he tries to kind of put it on his favoured right foot and then forces, I think, Ederson into a save or whichever centre back blocks it. But I can guarantee you, if Palmer shoots, there's a 70% chance of a goal. And if Jackson shoots with his left foot, I think there's a 95% of chance of a goal. But it just kind of sums him up as a player, how kind of frustrating he is, how inconsistent he is. And I'm pretty sure had he maybe gotten a goal in his last couple of games against Wolves, Bournemouth, Palace, he would have been taken out with his left foot. But that kind of indicates that he's just not really got the confidence right now. So yeah, really disappointing that we couldn't double up our lead. And then all of a sudden, City are back into the game through individual mistakes. And I can guarantee you, had that game gone on for another 20 minutes, 30 minutes, another 45 minutes of football, I still don't see us scoring. I feel like that's how poor we were. I kind of was happy to see Nkuku come in for Jackson, but just Nkuku looked like a bit of a headless chicken or lost puppy out there. Not really. His work rate off the ball was poor. His positioning was poor. I would have actually gone with Gui probably in hindsight instead of Jackson. But yeah, there's a lot of things we can talk about with Maresca's decisions, substitutions, with his goalkeeper choices. But overall, I think it was one of the poorest performances, particularly that second half all
Yeah.
season, because like we said, I think City were there for the taking. Two new faces in their 11, centre back who looked nervy. And had you told me before kickoff that we'd be facing a back line of Nunez as the right back, Akanji, Kushanov, and trying to think who their left back was,
It was Gvardiol.
Guardiola, then I would have been like, yeah, we can easily capitalize on this. There's some mistakes in there. There's a bit of a youthfulness, and that's how I felt after 5-10 minutes, and then it all just
Yeah.
went downhill. So yeah, the 5 hours coach journey back to London, which got me back to Stamford Bridge at 1 a.m., was very, very disappointing, and a lot of reflecting on that coach journey for sure.
He didn't. By the way, can you hear me? Okay. Just
I can, yes,
yeah.
just
Just
slightly, a bit muted though.
right. I just wanted to double check because I think my levels were a bit weird. But yeah, no. I think the performance itself was just. It was just what you just said. The summary of that was spot on. I want to talk about the goal first of all, our goal, because
Mm.
we exploited that left side or the right side, sorry, of Man City really well. I thought Nicholas Jackson done really well. This is where I think people get my hatred or my disliking for it's not hatred, but my disliking to Nicholas Jackson because I praise him a lot. And I think a lot of people miss that when we praise him. We praise him for the right things that he does. He holds up the ball really well. He was done really well to create the goal for Noni Madueke as well. But like you said, that opportunity, and I want to ask you this question because I've had loads of debates about this over the weekend so far about Cole Palmer's pass to Nicholas Jackson for the so-called second opportunity to take us 2-0 into the game. Some are saying that Cole Palmer's pass wasn't the best. It was, almost impossible for Nicholas Jackson to strike the ball, first time. He had to compose himself to be able to take the shot on. But a good striker doesn't need to do that. And I think that's my problem is that Nicholas Jackson, he called it right. He only tend if you go back to some of his previous attempts at goal, they're always on his right foot, or even when he's got the opportunity to use his left because it's better suited, he'll go to his right, and it's just that's why he's not getting the goals from the chances that are being created. For me, I don't. I mean, two things can be wrong at the same time. Cole Palmer's pass was not great. As an elite striker, as a Didier Drogba, Diego Costa, they're scoring that goal. They're scoring that goal with ease. There's no issues with them scoring. I look at Nicholas Jackson, and we have to be honest. Nicholas Jackson is not the level that will get us a Premier League or a Champions League. He's not that player. I don't think so. He's been at this club now for nearly 2 years, or has been at this club for beyond 2 years nearly. There's been no improvement, and that's my worry. Did you think the Cole Palmer pass was? I'm not going to say it was wayward and it was overcooked because I don't think it was. I think it was a good enough pass to create a goal from. But do you think the pass was what threw Nicholas Jackson off and why we can potentially use that as the reason why he didn't get that goal?
I'll be very honest with you. I don't think that there was a single issue of the pass until you sent me the link on WhatsApp and asked me for my feedback on the pass. I thought the pass was absolutely fine, and the proof is in the pudding. Had that goal gone in the back of the net, we would not have been complaining about the pass. But the
Exactly.
issue comes from Nicholas Jackson because if that's an Isak, a Gyökeres, Osimhen,
So,
even Liam Delap from Ipswich, that's in the
yeah,
back of the net.
with
And then we're
slight
not having
tackle.
this conversation right now about the potential assist or the pass from Palmer.
Yeah,
And that's why, like, it's bad to say, but like, if I'm Cole Palmer and I see Jackson there, and I'm kind of like a top goal scorer of the club, player of the season, I'm shooting. I'm shooting. I think Palmer's entitled to shoot given his form. If it's someone like Madueke, someone like I'm not sure a midfielder who doesn't really know how to find the back of the net, then maybe I agree with them, pass it. But someone like Palmer, you've got to shoot. You're in red hot form. You shoot, and even if it's like forces Edison into a save, maybe you get on the rebound. But but yeah, I guess it's kind of like hindsight's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I feel like Jackson's got to score and Palmer's got to maybe kind of like question if he should be shooting in the first place as well.
yeah. And I agree with that. I think, one of the things that I've said on here, maybe the last 2 weeks or so, is that if Cole Palmer isn't performing, take him out of the team, sub him off, don't start him. I still have this question around Nkunku. You mentioned him earlier. His confidence will be in the ground. He's been told that he's not going to be a regular starter at the club. He then comes on half an hour left into the game, and he's been told to play as a false nine. Maresca's come out on numerous occasions and said his best position is a 10. It just doesn't make any sense. And I agree with you. Mark Gu has to be given an opportunity at some point in this squad for this season for me, because I don't think Nicholas Jackson will generate enough goals for us to consider ourselves top four candidates this season. But we have to do something different. You can't, like I said at the start of this, you can't churn out. Or I said yesterday in yesterday's video, you can't put out the same squad and expect different results to come from it, because the team currently is not performing well as a team collectively. But let's talk about the City goals, because I mean, look, we have to talk about Robert Sanchez separately. But the first goal, Gravadio, it was. I mean, I don't want to just solely blame Robert Sanchez, because I don't think he was just at fault. But that is what City do. They take a shot on, and there's always one or two players ready to receive the second ball, or to catch the rebound off a goalkeeper and slot the ball into the back of the net. But you just wanted to get to that half time 1-0 up, and it can kind of change the landscape of the second half. But to concede just before half time, it just didn't fill me with joy going into that second half. But what was your thoughts on the first City goal, Gravadio? Could it have been avoided?
I feel like the City goal was inevitable at that stage. I feel like we played well in the first 10 to 15 minutes, that we kind of allowed City to do what they do and play their football, especially at home. I think maybe 5 or 10 minutes before their goal, Foden rattled the post from a strike. So it felt like their goal was coming, even when Sanchez parried it out and they managed to score. I forgot who it was. I think was it Marmoush? And
Marmouche, yeah.
yeah, and then luckily it was offside. So their goal felt like it was coming, but it just felt like a bit of an avoidable goal. It was like, I wouldn't even call it a one-on-one, because Cucurella was almost side by side with I think it was Haaland, whoever it was, and
Yeah.
then it almost just feels like there's not enough communication between Cucurella and Sanchez, where all of a sudden the two of them are like right next to each other, and then you've got to kind of communicate in a way where Cucurella could have been marking Vardiol, or someone else could have been marking him. Because I think Sanchez makes the save, but then both of them are out of the positioning, and then it just falls to Guardiola, who just slots it in. But all game, it was City attempting the same thing. There's kind of through balls, or there's a lot of passes, even at times from their goalkeeper Ederson, that would just find a way through our midfield, through our defence, and we just failed to play the offside trap. So that was a real struggle throughout the game, and that's how the Foden goal came about as well. And I think even their second goal, which was a lob pass from, I think it might have directly been from Ederson to
It
Haaland.
was. It was.
Yeah. But yeah, I think an avoidable goal, but less avoidable than the second goal, that's for sure.
Mm. I think, yeah, let's talk about the second goal, because I've watched that clip back, and it was a beautiful ball from Edison. And if you notice as well, our line was too high in that game. I thought our defensive line was way too high, even at 2-1. Or 1-1, I should say. I know we're trying to come back into the game. We're trying to get that second goal, which I think Maresca said after the game, you have to take those risks and leave your centre back 1v1 with Haaland, which I think is a big risk, especially with a player like Haaland, who very powerful, strong on the ball, got the pace, the agility to take on any defender. So I think that's always going to be a risk. But I get his point, because Mateo Nunes and Gravadio were also pushing up the pitch, so it left space for us to run into. But that phase of play where Edison over the top of our defenders. Now, what was frustrating was Trevor Chalobah is closing that space down. He's running with Haaland with the ball. We have Reece James, Levi Colwell, and I think it might be Mark Cucurella, all running back alongside. I think it was Sancho as well. So Sancho is running back. Now there's four against essentially Haaland and maybe I think it was Bernardo Silva. Sanchez has no reason to come out and try and intercept that pass. He's never going to make it, first of all. Just like basic science would tell you that there was no way he was going to get to that ball before Trevor Chalobah or Erling Haaland. And even when the penny drops that you're not going to get the ball, he's still there. And that's what I've never seen a goalkeeper with zero knowledge of positional awareness to not think, right, I'm not getting to this ball. I've got to get back in goal to try and at least recover the fact that I've come out the goal in the first place. There was none of that with him. This is not the first time he's done this as well. So it's really, really frustrating to watch a goalkeeper, Premier League top goalkeeper, playing that way, in my opinion. It just, does he need to do that, I suppose, is the question. Why would he come out of his goal knowing that Trevor Chalobah, who had put in a really good performance up until that point, was there to cover up that defensive mistake that we made with the high line? It just, what was your thoughts on it?
I mean, even if Trevor Chalobah isn't there, there's still no reason for him to come out, because if you look at the angle Haaland was running at, he was almost like closer to the touchline than the penalty.
He's running away from goal.
He's running away from goal, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's at that stage where maybe Sanchez, when he realizes Denny's got a one-on-one, Denny should kind of like close down the space and rush out. But he comes out almost the moment the ball was landing at Haaland's feet, when Chalobah was like a couple meters away from him. And then the part that I get annoyed is he finds himself in no man's land because he hesitates. He's like, do I stay here? Do I go back? Then as he starts going back, Haaland lifts his head and, like any world-class number 9 does, just chips the goalkeeper and finds the back of the net. And it's just such a frustrating, avoidable goal. I just feel like any other goalkeeper, I'm going to say it's any other goalkeeper we've had in the history of our club is not making that mistake. Yeah. You look back at Kepa, you look back at Mendy, you look back at Courtois, they all had their flaws, but they didn't have that kind of brain fog moment of just rushing out their goal and finding themselves in kind of wasteland and no man's land. I mean, Kepa, we criticised him with, his wrists sometimes weren't the strongest. Mendy, his distribution or his when he had the ball at his feet wasn't the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just kind of like week in, week out. And then the statistic that worries me the most is no Premier League goalkeeper other than Robert Sanchez has made more mistakes leading to goals, which has been 5 now.
Yeah.
And we're talking about Chelsea Football Club, one of the teams that should be competing for top 4 or getting silverware. And your goalkeeper should be there to rescue you points, not to give points to opposition. And that's why, like, I just feel like we're not going to challenge seriously at all if we keep playing Robert Sanchez. And for me, I actually feel sorry for Robert Sanchez, because he's proven to us as the fans, as other fans, to pundits, to even other teams who face him now, that this is what he does. This is his ability. This is the way he plays. And it's almost like I can't do anything about it now, because he's been at the club for a year and a half. You would have thought that the goalkeeper coaches can amend these mistakes, but clearly they haven't been able to do this. But the responsibility now relies on Maresca, who week in, week out continues to play in between the sticks. And that's where it kind of falls on, because if your manager is consistently playing you, then the blame is on him at the end of the day. And the same thing with Jackson. Like, if we're criticizing Jackson for not finding a goal and we want Mark Gui to play instead of him, then the same thing needs to happen with your goalkeeper. If you make mistakes in goal, you get dropped and you play Jorgensen. Yeah. And then it's almost to show you that your place in the first team isn't guaranteed. If you want to get back into the first team, you need to improve and cut these mistakes out of your game. So yeah, I think the Maresca's now got to swallow some pride and forget about what he said at the start of the season, saying Jorgensen's my cup keeper and Sanchez is my league keeper. But that's now gone, needs to go into the bin. And against West Ham on Monday night, we need to see Jorgensen between the sticks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've done a lot of videos the last couple of days about the sporting directors, which I want to ask you about shortly. But I think there has to, and I've always said in those videos, there is an element of blame that has to go onto Maresca, because Maresca is and I said it before, he's putting out the same team and expecting a different result. And if what's staring you clearly in the face, that the goalkeeper is not good enough, this is a goalkeeper that was third choice at Brighton. And I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way to Robert Sanchez, but there's a question as to why you're third choice at a club like Brighton. We love stats at this club now. We like to use, sports scientists and data analysis to bring in players, but there has to be an element of watching a player with the naked eye as well and seeing that he's just not good enough. It's just to me, it's just a case of, like you said, Maresca has to now backtrack on some of the things he said, even leading up to the game. I think it was either after the Wolves game or before the Wolves game, he said he sort of threw some of the other players under the bus. I think it was Nani Madueke and Nicholas Jackson, and saying that they also make mistakes, but they can almost get away with it a little bit. The reason I say that is because other players can step up and score goals, or other players can cross the ball into the box. Your goalkeepers, you've got one on the pitch, and this is not an area of the team that you can, piss around with, to use the word that term loosely. You can't mess around with a goalkeeper's situation. You have to have a solid keeper that is confident, that is able to distribute the ball, that can use his hands and actually stop the ball from hitting the back of the net, that doesn't have these brain fog moments that almost the Aaron Ramsdale effect, where you're just there and you're switching off at critical moments in the game against Erling Haaland. He was embarrassed to score that goal. You could see it in his face. I mean, you probably didn't see it whilst you were there at the stadium, but watching it back, he's almost smirking because he can't believe. It's like watching FIFA when you're losing 7-0 on FIFA and you just bring your goalkeeper out just because you can. It was one of those moments where why is the goalkeeper even there in that situation? So what's worrying is this is not an isolated issue with Sanchez, and this is something we're seeing constantly every single game. It doesn't always lead to errors or lead to goals, but they can do. And ultimately, this could get Maresca sacked. And I would never want it to come to that. I don't think it will. But if you're continually playing the players that are not providing what they need in the squad, eventually the results are going to get to the point where you can't manage the squad anymore, because they lose faith. Then you lose the dressing room. And then before you know it, we press and restart on the project all over again. It's just, I don't think Maresca's the massive issue. I think for me, it's Paul Winstanley, Laurence Stewart. And I want to ask you about them, because a lot of my frustration, especially this week, has been geared towards them, because I feel like they're put in a position where they have to bring in the right players at this football club. And we've been successful before they've been here of doing that, with, looking at the history under Roman Abramovich and the players that we brought in. I'm not saying all of them were great, because we had the likes of, Winston Bogard and, other players that just didn't fit the bill. But what's your initial thoughts, or what's your thoughts so far on how the sporting directors of a club like Chelsea Football Club have not been able to fulfill their duties as sporting directors?
It's poor, and it's really, from the fan perspective, it's disappointing as well, because you had someone before in like Marina Granovskaya who would actually love the club. I think she's still kind of quite present on Twitter with the fans, and she kind of still, I think she still lives around Chelsea or Belgravia and goes to Stamford Bridge often. And you could really tell she wanted the best for the players, and she would identify some of the best candidates, best players to recruit. And then you've got these two guys now who fail to even identify positions of the pitch where we need reinforcements, and then they fail to identify the right players to bring in to fill in that void. And what really disappoints me as well is the patience they have with certain of these players. Like, you look at Renato Vega, 6 months and he's already out of the door to Juventus.
Yeah.
You look at Petrovic, who didn't do much wrong, and then a year later he's on loan to our sister club, RC Strasbourg. There's plenty of other people. You could go Ugochukwu, Andre Santos, who arguably I think are good enough now to slot in our midfield, and we've got them on our books. They're technically Chelsea players, but we're not utilising them. So what tells me is almost like there is a very small margin for error in this gap that makes you think like, all right, if these people aren't good enough, then like, why are you bringing in another 19-year-old from Ecuador, another 18-year-old from the MLS? And even when Fabrizio tweeted yesterday that Chelsea are going to be very busy in the last week of the transfer window, that doesn't really fill me up with joy, because that makes me think we're going to go all out for Garnacho, sign some unknown talent from Ecuador, and probably some unknown left back from the MLS. So it makes me think like, it's just almost like a vicious cycle that repeats itself. And for those who didn't listen to our last few recordings, we were both in agreement that there's only been 3 successful players that we've signed under this new kind of ownership, which has been Caicedo, Palmer, and Cucurella. And thank bloody God they've been successful, because we've spent a combined 200 million, I think, on the 3 of them.
Yeah.
So it makes you realize that like, if those 3 can't be successful, then there's no hope for the rest. And I think that probably represents 200 million, maybe 20% of the total amount we spent under this new ownership. So you look at all the other players, they've been flops, or just haven't been present, or injured, or sent out on loan, or we just haven't seen enough of them. So yeah, it's disappointing. And then I think the cherry on the cake for me is we still need a goalkeeper. We still need a centre-back. and we could do a midfielder, and we definitely could do a striker. And that's the whole bloody spine of a team. The whole bloody spine, and that's having spent $1 billion in about 3 or 4 transfer windows, and we're still
1.5 billion.
talking 1.5 billion. Make it worse, yeah. So we're still talking about needing a spine to our starting 11 or our squad, and yet we're going out for Garnacho. So like
And
I said, I think
offloading and Kunku in the process of doing that as well.
and yeah, offloading Nkuku on loan or permanently to Manchester United potentially. So it just feels like we're struggling to identify the areas of the pitch where we need reinforcing, and we're struggling to identify the right players. So yeah, it's been so disappointing, and I just feel like almost like they're getting paid to just identify, look at stats, and get these kids from abroad that are meant to be good but just aren't Premier League ready at all.
I agree with you. I actually think the owners feel they are doing a good job, because by their mandate, they are probably successfully meeting their objectives by bringing in the younger players that we can then sell on for profit, and we can sell on 6 or 12 months in that time, and get them a loan to then sell them on. So I think from an owner business perspective, they're actually probably getting patted on the back for what they're doing, because that's what I think the Chelsea model will be, is to, like you said, bring in the 18 or 19-year-olds from South America or wherever they come from, bring them in, loan them out, sell them on. So I think they are doing what they are supposed to be doing. But from a fan's perspective and the history of the club, to not have a recognised goal scorer at this club is crazy to me. To not have a Didier Drogba, a Diego Costa, a Samuel Eto'o, a Nicolas Anelka at this club is mental. To not have a solid centre-back at this club, when you look at the history of the centre-backs we've had and some of our partnerships we've had at this club, to not have a goalkeeper that is confident in front of his defenders, or with his defenders in front of him, is crazy. This is Chelsea Football Club. We shouldn't even be talking about, after 1.5 billion, still needing a spine. And you look at like Christopher Vival, who was part of that setup originally. You can see why he walked away from this, because this is almost like a scattergun approach, but not in quick succession. This is like scattergun for 2.5 years. It's just nothing really makes sense. And I said the other day, maybe Thomas Tuchel was actually relieved when he was told he was no longer the manager, because you never forget the time when Todd Boehly first come in and it was the 4-4-3 formation. I mean, that must have just blew his mind, the fact that an owner of a football club thinks we can play with 12 men on the pitch. It's just mental. Those things for me are just, I think Thomas Tuchel probably thought, fair enough. I don't want these issues. I don't want, after a West Ham game, for you to be knocking on the door asking your American mates to come in and with their kids in the middle of it. Those things should not be happening. This is very much a business now at Chelsea. And I think, like I said at the start of this part of the conversation, I think that the sporting directors are probably being praised behind closed doors for bringing through youthful talent to sell on for profit. The problem by doing that is you're neglecting everything you need for Maresca, which is why I don't necessarily just blame Maresca. You're neglecting what he needs to be able to do the job he needs to do current, present day, today. We've neglected all of those things to accommodate this bullshit of bringing in young players. And you can't sustain that at a football club. You just can't do that.
No, it's like it's a broken strategy, and it's like you said, we've gone from world-class goalkeepers, centre-backs, midfielders, strikers, to very mediocrity right now, and almost mediocrity, and also not like a given first name on every lineup. Like, we're still struggling. We've signed, I think, about 6 or 7 goalkeepers under this new
We've got
ownership.
8. I think we've got 8 on the books. Yep.
I think when you got Bergstrom and Beach, I think, as well there, and none of them are good enough to be our starter, I think. And that's probably 200 million or close to 200 million spent just on goalkeepers. And then you've got guys like Mamadashvili, I bring up his name every time, who's on his way to Liverpool.
And how much did they sign him for? Was it like 35 million or something?
35, and they've got, I would say, like probably the best goalkeeper in the Premier League already, and the best backup in the goal.
Bad to say, Kelleher as well. Yeah,
which I would happily take any of those two at Chelsea Football Club. But instead, we're stuck with like players out on loan who probably don't want to come back to the club, given the way they've been treated, like Petrovic and Kepa. Then you've got guys like Sanchez and Jurgensen, who are, for me, I know we talk about Jurgensen being like the solution to Sanchez, but he's not, in my opinion.
He might not be. Yeah.
We haven't seen enough of him, and there's times where he hasn't really filled me with confidence or joy watching him either. I do think he's an upgrade, but yeah, it's just frustrating.
Mm.
I think the main thing that if someone's listening to this, the big thing you need to take out of this ownership is the 1.5 billion we spent, but the fact we still need to strengthen almost in 3 major areas of the pitch. For
Yeah.
me, that is so worrying as a Chelsea fan.
Mm.
And we talk about the millions and millions and almost billions we've spent, more than billions. But the fact we still need to reinforce and strengthen, and we were all saying, "Oh, we don't need to sign anyone in January," and then all of a sudden now we need to sign 3 or 4 players. And then the other thing that's worrying is the fact we still haven't been able to offload players that aren't part of the plans, like Chukwuemeka, like Ben Chilwell,
Yeah.
like Cassidy as well. Dewsbury Hall, I think even his future is up in the air.
Yeah.
So that's also worrying as well. We can talk about ingoings, but when you look at the outgoings, there's also players that are going to be stuck here probably for another 6 months and not get a single minute of football either.
And it's interesting because I was watching Marmoush for City against us on Saturday, and I was thinking, there's a player right there that, I mean, he looked electrifying against us. We have to admit that. He was just, every time the ball was coming into the attack for City, it's almost, and I don't want to compare the two, this is a very lazy comparison, but it reminds me of a Mo Salah who's just on it. The pace, the vision, the moments in front of goal just looked killer instinct. And to have a player like that who's willing to move in the January winter window, you've got to ask the question why Chelsea weren't after someone like that who can play as a striker. It's just poor, this poor recruitment can't continue, because ultimately, and I said this yesterday in a previous video, bearing in mind we don't have our front of shirt sponsor that's still not sorted. That's still not sorted. We're into February next week, or this week I think is February, or next week is February. We still don't have a front of shirt sponsor. We may as well not bother now. I mean, what's the point? But you can't sustain a football club like this and continue to expect the manager, who I think is being told potentially not to play certain players, like Ben Chilwell. He's been probably told not to play him, because I think I would say Ben Chilwell was probably one of the highest earners at Chelsea.
Yeah, I think now that Sterling's technically
Moved
out
on.
loan,
Reece
probably
James.
second behind Reece James, I think. Yeah.
So I think he's not going to say to Reece James, "You're not playing." He's Chelsea through and through. He's the captain, so one of the two will play. But I think the whole reason why Chilwell's been frozen out, bearing in mind you've just let Renato Vega go to Juventus, is because of the wages. And I think you said that last week. But you can't run a football club like that. You can't run any business like this. Actually, not even just a football club. You can't spunk away 1.5 billion pounds in any corporate business anywhere and expect to see results. You can't do that. Some companies would have folded by now based on this, or there'd been inquiries to why this has actually been allowed to happen. It's just that we've got these rich billionaire owners that don't actually know how to run a football club. And you called it right, Marina Granovskaya and Petr Cech. Think back to those successful times under Roman Abramovich. Now, I'm not saying all their transfers were brilliant, because they weren't. We knew that we lost, we brought in some players and we lost some key players that we should have retained, like, Antonio Rudiger and so on and so on. But at least they had the right idea of who they needed to bring in. And we might not have got all those deals over the line, but at least you could see the intent for us to go and sign X, Y, and Z player. We're not even linked with anyone, and the window shuts. I mean, we are, but when I say linked, I'm linked where we need those players. We have not linked with any goalkeepers. We're not linked with any strikers. We're not linked with any central defenders. The window shuts in 10 days, I think, or 9 days. It's not good enough.
Yeah. And, I talked to a lot of my Manchester United mates saying the way your club's run is a shambles. But it's almost identical with Chelsea.
Yeah.
I think the only difference is a lot of our recent recruitments have been, pre-Bowley have been positive or successful. Whereas you look at United, arguably the only one I can think of post-Fergie that's been successful, and that's still a big question mark, is Bruno Fernandes. All their other transfers have been very, very poor, and they let players run down their contracts, like Casemiro and Eriksen, before they leave on the free. But you look at how Rashford's being treated right now, I think what Amorim is saying is to cover up the way the club's run, but he's saying he doesn't fit my plans, he doesn't train well, etc. But realistically, I think he's one of the highest earners as well, and I think he's been frozen out because they're
Earns
struggling
too
with
much.
FFP as well. earns too much. He needs to be off the books. Same thing with Garnacho. Same thing with Kobe Mainu. They're homegrown players. We suffered with the homegrown issue with Mason Mount, with Conor Gallagher, Trevor Chalobah. So we know all about it. So every time I think now, like the way your club's run is a shambles, talking about Manchester United, but we're almost mirroring, slightly better maybe, given that we know we're pushing for top four. I don't know, it's still a big question mark on that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's worrying. I think it's really worrying sometimes, these owners who come in thinking they know how to run a football club, but it's not like any other business. We're talking about players that they almost treat these players like they're employees who can come and go and can be easily replaced with better performers. But it's just not the case anymore. And you look at the recruitment, the way things are run, it's very disappointing. And yeah, it's not positive at all. And I think you summed it up perfectly in your last two recordings that you did on your own. I've been listening to those, and I kind of echo everything you have to say in those recordings for sure.
It is worrying. It's worrying times. Robert Sanchez. Let's just end on Robert Sanchez. We started with him. Let's end on that part. Does he get dropped by Enzo Maresca? Has he got the balls to drop it? Has he got the balls to drop Robert Sanchez after his comments and backing him, a couple of weeks ago? Surely West Ham Monday night, we will not see Robert Sanchez in goal.
You bloody hope so, yeah. I think this was the tipping point for me. Even Maresca looked a bit broken when he was asked about the situation. He was still defending him, obviously, but he's a human being with feelings, emotions. You've got to defend him. But at the same time, you've also got to do what's right for the club. And if you want to progress and you really want to push for top four, like I said about dropping Jackson for Gui, like you mentioned, dropping Jackson for Nkunku for the City game, I think now it's time that we do the same and drop Robert Sanchez and play Jurgensen. I mentioned it kind of like previously in this recording. I don't think Jurgensen's the finished product and he's going to be the answer to all our problems, but I think it's a short-term solution. And it could even be to the case where Jurgensen now becomes our league keeper and Sanchez becomes our cup keeper, similarly to what happened last season when Petrovic came in for his injury and then Sanchez was fit again. I feel like their roles were almost inverse. So yeah, I feel like almost Pochettino saw it last season, and now it's time for Maresca to see it that Sanchez just isn't good enough to wear that number one jersey at Chelsea Football Club.
I think he's got to. I think more so because of a mentality thing as well. I think he has to take him out of the limelight. He's under a lot of pressure in goal. I wasn't there obviously on Saturday, but I heard there was a lot of boos and groans when Sanchez got the ball. I think there was a cheer as well when he actually done something correct as a goalkeeper, and that can't be.
It was bad to see, but every time he had the ball, the Chelsea fans were booing him.
Yeah,
and he's struggling with the ball at his feet already. But imagine have a chorus of boos from your own fans.
As soon
as you get the ball, it's not what you like to see. But also, you can feel that frustration boiling from the Chelsea fans from the first match week against Man City.
But this is the thing that Maresca has to do correctly now as the manager, and this is man management. You've got to take him out of the limelight, and I'm not saying throw Jurgensen into the lion's den, but you've got to give him the opportunity. It might be like you said, it doesn't work, and Jurgensen could actually be 10 times worse than Robert Sanchez. But I think he needs that run of games. I don't think there's a massive risk in putting Jurgensen in goal and seeing what happens, especially at this point in the season now, because if we're being realistic, I don't think we make top four now. I think we've dropped too many points over that Christmas period. We dropped out of the top four of all nature at the moment as it stands. Even if we win against West Ham, I still think we struggle now to get back. And I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. I think when you drop out that top four, it's going to be a struggle to get back into it. You look at Bournemouth, Forest, City, Arsenal, Newcastle. They're all there or thereabouts, and they look like they're picking up form in the best parts of the season now, the back end of this season. I don't think there's a massive risk. I really don't. But question I want to ask as well is, because I do remember reading this in The Athletic, I think when Maresca was signed and the owners came out, I feel like there might be a clause in Maresca's contract that he must, or one of his objectives is that he must get top four. And I know he's come out previously and said that isn't the case, that the club, the owners aren't expecting him to get Champions League football next season. But I feel like these owners are very reactionary to what the fans think. they clearly listen a lot to the fans and they take what they say on board to an extent. Is there a danger that Maresca might lose his job at the end of this season?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge danger. I don't
Mm.
want it to happen. I just
Yeah,
don't like seeing all this chopping and changing so often. But we
yeah,
saw with Potter how the owners backed him, said he's part of our long-term vision and strategy. And then I think 5 or 6 months into his tenure as the manager, he was given his marching orders. Pochettino as well managed to kind of steer the ship towards the end of last season, get us into Europe, get us into six, which, given the injuries and the season we had, I thought was quite an achievement. And then he was given his marching orders as well. So I think why should Maresca kind of be immune to that? I'm not saying I want this to happen again, but I feel like there definitely is a risk and a danger of it happening. I was going to ask you a question as well, kind of linked back to the goalkeeper situation. Kepa Arrizabalaga, who's having a brilliant season at Bournemouth, technically still our player, will be coming back to Chelsea as of June. What do you do with him?
I'd keep him. I would have kept him this season. I really would have kept him. I think I'd have to go back and re-listen to some of the old podcasts that we've done, but I'm pretty sure I said I would have kept him as an option this season, purely because he's coming. He's coming under a new manager. He's working under a new manager in Maresca. He didn't necessarily need to be first choice, but I think when you look at how Sanchez has played so far this season, it would have been nice to have someone like Kepa on to call on rather than Jurgensen. I think it would have been a bit more, and he's a bit more mature in goal, isn't he? I think he's a bit more confident in goal, and you can kind of, and like you said, he's playing really well for Bournemouth. So I would have kept him. I would have kept him at the club, and I would keep him again. I wouldn't sell him on, but as we know, the club potentially will sell him on to try and make some money out of him. So, what do you think? Do you think he should stay, retain him, keep him?
I mean, let's actually rewind to summer 2023, where he was our goalkeeper in pre-season.
Yeah,
Pochettino kind of had him as his number one, and then all of a sudden, Real Madrid came calling after the Courtois injury,
that was it.
and he went out on loan there. So, and then we panicked, I think, kind of with 1 or 2 weeks left in the transfer window, and signed Robert Sanchez. So he was almost like the domino effect that led us to get Robert Sanchez.
Hmm.
But in my head now, I'm a bit like, is he going to be one of those players that's headed out on loan and never really returns? We never even see again in the training images from Cobham, like we saw with Lukaku, with even, I don't know who else, Ziyech, I think, kind of went down that road after his Galatasaray loan.
Yeah.
Or will he be a bit like a Trevor Chalobah or a Casadei who goes out on loan and slowly finds his way back into the team with a bit of a miracle and proves himself out there?
Hmm.
I'm kind of hoping it's the latter, because I do think, like you said, he's really matured on his loans in Madrid and in Premier League with Bournemouth. I also feel like there's also a bit of hope for Petrovic now.
There's got to be
He put in a brilliant performance at the weekend.
man of the match.
Man of the match in a 2-1 win for RC Strasbourg.
Hmm.
But then we're in this weird situation where we're going to have like 7 goalkeepers at Cobham in June, July. And what do we do with the 4 that can't really make the 3, the cut? So yeah, but I think if you look on paper, our goalkeepers, I think Kepa is our most experienced and our best keeper out of the lot.
I would go even a step further and say we either loan or sell Sanchez, and we keep Kepa next season, because I don't think goalkeepers are that easy to come by, and I don't think there'll be many goalkeepers that we will have our pick from, especially if we don't make Champions League football. I don't think there's going to be many keepers we'll have a choice of in the summer. So Kepa's a stopgap, I think. I don't think he's going to be the be-all and end-all for Chelsea. I can't see him playing for many more years at Chelsea, but I think especially, you might find it a bit easier to pick one up after the World Cup. Maybe that start of that season after the World Cup, you go and find yourself a keeper that might have done really well at the World Cup. But the build up to the World Cup, the fact we might now miss out on Champions League, I said yesterday in the video, there's not going to be many. We need to be careful we don't lose Cole Palmer, who was talking very closely to Pep Guardiola at the end of the game. We need to be careful we don't lose Enzo Fernandez, who looks shocked at Sanchez and frustrated.
Yeah.
So
it's a really good point. Yeah, because I remember when we spoke about Cole Palmer, we said he's a brilliant player, but we just need to be careful that we secure top 4 now, because
Real Madrid come knocking.
Other than top 4, Real Madrid come knocking.
City come knocking for him, which it looks like Pep was sort of tapping him up a little bit after the game. If one of those clubs come in for him, and he's a Mancunian, he's going to want to go back to Manchester at some point. If they come knocking, which they could do, this is Man City, we lose him. Now he's the source of our goals, the source of our assists over the last 2 seasons. We lose him. You know, how are you going to convince a goalkeeper to come to a club if you lose Enzo Fernandez and Cole Palmer in quick succession? Because I feel like Enzo Fernandez has been here long enough now to realize that things aren't probably as they were sold to him before signing. Now, if we lose him, we could still lose Reece James. I mean, that Trent talks died down a lot, so Real Madrid could come in for Reece James as well. And we lose Cole Palmer. Any goalkeeper, I know I'm saying someone as well, even like Alexander Isak or Victor Gyökeres, Victor Osimhen. Imagine sitting down with them and the agent sat with you and we've lost all these players and they're trying to convince you to come and play Conference League football. Like it just wouldn't happen. Like why would Alexander Isak want to come to Chelsea? Yes, the money will be brilliant, but do you want to go and play Astana, Shamrock Rovers? Or do you want to go and play against Barcelona and Real Madrid? Because, it can't happen. But would you sell Sanchez at the end of the season if you could?
I think he's walking on thin ice now. He's got probably 6 months to prove himself and redeem himself. And I like what you mentioned about the World Cup next summer in the US being almost like a way for us to maybe recruit a world-class goalkeeper. We saw that. I think I always remember World Cup 2014 when Keylor Navas got his move to Real Madrid after impressing there. Espino got his move to Arsenal after impressing there. And Claudio Bravo got a move to Barcelona after impressing there. So it almost feels like a way for goalkeepers to prove themselves. And I feel that's what Mamardashvili did with Georgia at the Euros in Germany last summer. He was brilliant at Valencia for the last 2 or 3 years, but I feel it was almost like
catapults you to another level.
A catapult, for him to kind of really get that move to an elite European club. Club World Cup could be quite interesting as well. You never know, we might come across some wonder kid who plays in the net for Flamengo or...
I hope not, because we'll sign him. That's what we don't need. Don't need another 18-year-old. We need a 27-year-old, 20 goals a season player in the team. But I forgot about the Club World Cup as well. I don't even want to think. I don't even want to think. I'm trying not to think too far ahead. I'm just thinking about Graham Potter, West Ham on Monday. Which I'm sure we'll do a preview on that one as well. But I do worry about Chelsea. I do. There's, like I said, sporting directors haven't been good. The commercial side's not been good. It's just not good overall. Business side and football side is not good. But I want to see let's round it off on a positive. I want to see Maresca change things tactically, especially against someone like West Ham. I think he's got the options to do that. So, we spoke about Sanchez and Jurgensen. I would potentially take Jackson, maybe start Mark Gu, maybe put Cole Palmer to the right, or you give him a rest in this game. But I think Maresca has to change things because a lot of the anger and frustration from the fans currently is on the sporting directors and the owners, but that was soon changed to Maresca. I think you said Maresca out was trending last week. So, those things will become a more apparent thing for Maresca if he doesn't wake up and change things that he has control over with this team. What do you hope Maresca can change, maybe more so for Monday, but overall for the rest of the season?
I think firstly, make changes to the lineup. Like you mentioned, drop Jackson for Gui. I want to see more of Felix in the Premier League. I know he was unavailable for personal reasons on Saturday. I want to see Jurgensen in between the sticks for Robert Sanchez. And then I also want to see him make substitutions earlier. I still think that's really lacking, whether that be at half-time, whether that be kind of on the 55th or 60th minute mark, but I don't want him waiting until the 80th minute to bring a striker off who hasn't scored a goal and to bring in Cuckoo or Guillon or Felix or Neto. So that needs to change as well. And I also want to see him take the cup seriously as well, because if we can't really get top four, I think the one thing that the fans want to see is a bit of silverware, and that's going to be the Conference League and the FA Cup. We need to take both those tournaments seriously. And I know we spoke about the Conference League being almost like guaranteed silverware now, but we've lost like some relatively important squad players for the Conference League, like Cassidy, Vega. And that probably means we're going to have to play almost our strongest 11 now in the Conference League. So we might struggle with injuries and fitness. I want him to take all the competitions seriously now. And that starts with Monday against West Ham. I think 3 points is a must, especially against Potter. Because if Potter comes back to Stamford Bridge, gets 3 points against us, I feel like that would be like the pinnacle of embarrassment that we faced. under the Bowley regime. Absolutely.
Well, I would say that is, but I remember we went to the Amex and I'm sure we got battered when Graham Potter was our manager. And that was
Yeah.
embarrassing. That was really embarrassing. But this will be up there. I think the fact of how the fans were very critical, I was probably one of them at times as well, that were very critical of Potter's time at Chelsea. For him to come to Stamford Bridge and get a result it'd be a deactivation mode for me. I think it would be deactivate all socials, mute every WhatsApp group that I'm in. We won't be recording a podcast that day. We will be busy doing something else. But no, it just wouldn't. It would show exactly what we've just spoken about for the last 50 minutes on this podcast, that things are not where they need to be. We need to move the needle in terms of getting the right players in. The manager tactically has to do better. But the sporting directors upstairs, the people that are in charge of this recruitment strategy, have to get things right. There's still 10 days of this window. I'll be very surprised if we see anyone come through those doors. I'll be very, very shocked. I don't even think the Garnacho deal will happen. I'll be shocked. I'll be shocked if we go out and buy, Evan Ferguson is crying out for a loan. I'd go and get him. I'd go and get him, see how he can do. I know he's had a really bad injury. He's been out for a long time, but it just gives someone like Jackson something else to think about. But I don't see it happening.
I think we're going to panic. Will it be January or next summer and give like 60, 70, 80 million for Liam Delap? I can see that happening.
I mean, he's had a good spell, he's had a really good spell. He's had a good season in terms of Ipswich, but is he the answer for 80 million?
No, I see it happening, but I don't think he is similar to Drewsbury Hall. Good player at Leicester in that kind of squad, but is Liam Delap, can he take that step up from a Ipswich who are battling for relegation to a Chelsea who are going to be fighting for top four? I don't know, but I think that's the typical type of move that this new ownership would look to make, especially given his Man City roots as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Ferguson for me would be the better option, loan deal option to buy. Had really good spells at Brighton. I think, he was linked to the £100 million player they were calling him a season or two ago. And yes, he's had a big injury, but I think if you can come into this Chelsea team on loan as well, it's almost like let's throw some more shit at the club and see if it sticks. And this could stick. It could stick. And if it doesn't, then we know we can return him after the end of the loan. Even if we've got to pay a small loan fee, I think we should take that small hit for the rest of this season. I said yesterday we can't miss out on top four. I'm still standing by that. I think financially we have to get top four.
Absolutely.
So we've got to make it, and we need a goal scorer, and he's a goal scorer. So bring him in. That's how I'm going to end my thoughts. But Theo, as always, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I actually feel better. I love when we talk Chelsea because, you get all these rival fans WhatsApping you throughout the weekend, and then you get to Monday, you can just sort of have a sit down with another Chelsea fan, and it's a good conversation to have. So I'm always grateful for that conversation. It's not, there's a couple of other fans that try and get onto your skin and talk a bit of nonsense. But I say all that to say, make sure you continue to support our channel, please. Make sure you subscribe, you like the videos, you leave your thoughts in the comments as well. The Linktree link is in the description for our social accounts and our podcast episodes. And we will be back later this week with some more content, and also the podcast later on in the week where we'll preview West Ham. Graham Potter's West Ham will be coming to Stamford Bridge. Can we get 3 points? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll be back soon.